Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosboll, and joining me today, I'm so excited about this conversation because this is so important. My guest today is Heather DeKeyser, LMFTCST, so you're going to have to tell us what those initials stand for. And
Sure.
She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist in Colorado with a passion for helping individuals and couples navigate the complexities of relationships and sexual health. She co-founded and is the clinical director of a group therapy practice called Dalliance Sexual Wellness Collective in Parker, Colorado. She is a survivor of triple negative breast cancer and spends her time running Dalliance, seeing her own caseload of clients, and going out into the community providing education about sexual health and wellness, particularly around the topics of sexuality and cancer. So welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you for having me on to share my story.
I am so excited to have you on here. And like I said, we're going to get into as much as possible today because this is such an important topic for anyone who's gone through breast cancer, any gynecologic cancer, men who've gone through testicular cancer. Sexual health, sexual wellness is just vital, and we don't really realize how much we miss it until it's gone. So again, thank you so much for being on here with me, and I just can't wait to dive in.
Oh, cool.
All right. So let's just start. Take us back to three and a half years ago, when you were initially diagnosed. Like, what was your life like? How were you diagnosed? Kind of tell the story about that a little bit.
Sure. So I got my actual diagnosis the end of June of 2020. And
right in the middle of COVID.
Yes. And 2020 was a particularly crappy year because in January of 2020, we had a pretty significant death in the family that was quite unexpected. And then in February of 2020, my dad suffered several strokes. And in March of 2020, he needed to have surgery. And my parents ended up living with me from like November of 19. They came out for Thanksgiving thinking they would be here for Christmas and the New Year, and then they would go back to Wisconsin. But then my dad suffered his strokes and wasn't cleared to travel and needed the surgery in March. And the day before Colorado shut its borders and shut things down, my parents left in their big RV and went back to Green Bay because they weren't sure when they would be able to get out if, depending on how things shut down from COVID. So, COVID was happening. And then in April, I found my lump for the first time. And then because of COVID, it took me a month to get into my doctor, just the first time, to have her feel it. And so I finally got in to see her in May. And fast forward a month later, it took me another month to get all in for all of my imaging and have the biopsy done. I mean, I went in for the ultrasound on a Monday and they were like, how do you feel about getting a biopsy tomorrow? And I was like, this doesn't sound great, doc. The radiologist came in and he's like, we saw your images. We know that it doesn't look great. We need to get a biopsy immediately. And so I had the biopsy that week. I had more imaging done. And then Friday evening at 5:50, I was about to head into a session with a client via phone. My doctor called me. It wasn't even my doctor because she doesn't work on Fridays, but it was the owner of the practice I go to. And she was like, Heather, you have breast cancer. And I was like, wait, what? Like, is this actually happening? I'm 33. What?
Wow.
But I kind of knew deep down. I think my intuition knew that when I found that lump, and it's kind of a funny story because my dog found it. Like, I am one of those stories where I was just laying in bed one morning and Halle Bear jumped on my lap and pawed my left breast. And I was like, that was just different. Like, from an internal knowing that, like, it didn't hurt. It wasn't uncomfortable. It just felt different. So I'm feeling around. And so that's how I originally found my lump. And then, I even hemmed and hawed. And I'm like, I'm 33. There's no way. Like, should I even go get the imaging done? It's going to be a month before I can get in. I'm so glad I did. My oncologist had ended up telling me, had you waited another 3 months, I probably would have been stage 4 because of how fast it was growing. And my tumor ended up being
Wow.
5 centimeters. And I mean, it was just, it was invading. And so that's how I got my diagnosis. I got off the phone with my doctor that night and I still did my session with my client. And I get asked all the time, like, how did you do it? Why did you do it? And I was like, couple of reasons. I just got this devastating news. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know what type it was yet. I just knew it was cancer. And my first thought was, what if this is the last time that I get to talk to this client? Or what if this is the last time in a long while that I get to be there for my client? And the second thought was, I don't want to call my parents and tell them that their daughter has breast cancer. I'm just not, like, I need an hour, you know? And I did. I went into that session at 6 p.m., was there for my client. And I think that's the last hour of my life that I was able to block out cancer because it's been with me ever since.
Mm.
And so I got diagnosed end of June. 2.5 weeks later, I had my port put in. I had my lymph nodes taken out to test those. And then the week later, I started chemo. So from time of diagnosis to starting treatment and everything, it was super fast. But between April and the end of June, finding that lump to getting the diagnosis, it was kind of hell for a while, dealing with all the emotions that came with it.
I bet. And not knowing and not being able to get in and all of the things. And it's like, I don't know, when I was diagnosed, it was like, all right, how quick can I get it out of me? Like that
Right.
was all that I thought of, like just get it out so I can go on. And
Yeah.
having to wait, I'm sure was not any fun at all.
Well, and just, because it was COVID, it's like, okay, because you're like, I had to go to the scans by myself and I had to go
Mhm.
to appointments by myself. And then once I got my diagnosis, they were like, okay, you can bring one person or you can have them call in. And it was just a really lonely experience going through. I mean, the medical system was figuring it out as they went too, but it was incredibly lonely to have to go through everything alone.
Okay. So you started with chemo. Yes, normally
Yes.
triple
So
negative, they do that.
yeah, and I think also because my tumor was so large and my lymph nodes were inflamed but came back negative for cancer. So that was obviously good, but my oncologist was like, I don't trust it. I don't trust that with how big and how expansive your tumor is, that there's just too great of a chance that part of it broke off and went somewhere else and is hanging out or hasn't landed anywhere and started dividing yet, but that doesn't mean it's not there. So she said, my tumor grew in and out. So it was right up against my chest wall. And so she said, if we do surgery now, we're going to have to take out your chest wall. And I don't know that we're going to have anything solid to anchor your implants to if you
Oof.
want to do reconstruction. And so she said, plus triple negative, you have a really high recurrence rate for the first several years. And triple negative is likely to come back in your bones, brain, lungs, or liver, not in your breasts. So we want a good baseline of how your body is going to and how your tumor is going to respond to the treatment, so that if it were to ever come back, we've got a baseline for how it responded, how quickly, what treatments it responded to. If we take it out and then we do chemo, we don't know what we're cleaning up just yet.
Mhm.
And so we want to shrink that baby as much as we can so that when you do go in for surgery, you have more surgical options. And so she's like, you're going to do 6 months of chemo first. So I did. I started chemo in July. I finished in December. I did 16 treatments over 20 weeks. So my first 12 rounds were Taxol and carboplatin. Carbo is a nasty, nasty drug. I mean, Taxol was brutal too because of the neuropathy that I experienced. But I was really solid until like treatment 6. I was like, okay, I'm still kind of working out. I'm taking walks. I'm getting my water in. The neuropathy's setting in, but I'm doing okay. Like I still kind of look like me. And then by treatment 7, I couldn't do stairs in my house anymore. The neuropathy was so bad I couldn't cut my own food. I couldn't tie my shoes. I had a hard time bathing by myself. And what was interesting about it is I had a friend, I call her my breastie, who was going through chemo. And she did treatment every 3 weeks. She had a different type of cancer. But she was still working out the whole time. And I thought I was doing something wrong. Like, I
Mm.
am having a hard time taking care of myself. I needed a few blood transfusions. I needed fluids. I was ending up in the ER for pain management and the bone pain and all of that. And I was like, I must just be like this weak little thing or something. Like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but why do I have it so hard? Like, what, I just judged myself and critiqued myself. And, I think chemo's cumulative, right? So the more treatments you do it, the longer you're on it, yeah, the tougher it's going to be on your body.
And
And
doing it weekly versus her doing it every 3 weeks. It had time to
right,
dissipate out in between treatments. Yeah.
that too.
Comparison is the thief of joy, right?
For sure. It really
Yeah.
is. It really is.
Okay. All right. So you did the chemo, you had surgery,
I had
you had
surgery at the end
radiation.
of December. I ended up having a full pathological response to chemo, which means that there was no evidence of any cancer via imaging once I finished chemo.
That's
And
fantastic.
I know my surgeon like almost fell off her chair. She's like, Heather, this
Just
is
went
the
from five
best
centimeters to
response.
nothing. That's
Exactly.
fantastic.
She's like, this is the best response we could have hoped for. Not only do you not have to do a double mastectomy now, you could do a lumpectomy and you can keep your nipple. And I was like, was it an option I wasn't going to keep my nipple? I mean, I went into it kind of ignorant about like, well, this is what my team is telling me to do. I trusted my oncologist and my breast cancer surgeon to the utmost. And I was like, okay, what should I do? And she's like, you're 33. How about we have you keep your breasts? We can always take them off later if they're causing you problems or anxiety, but keep your breasts. I'll take out about a golf ball sized chunk to really make sure we get clean margins. But if you want to do a lumpectomy versus mastectomy has no impact on your survival or your recurrence rates. So that is an option. Now, I will caveat that because I chose to do the lumpectomy and it looks great, right? Like she put the scar is right around where the edge of my areola. Like you can barely even see that thing now. And my
Nice.
my breast looks cool. I mean, when I bend over, there's a little bit of a concave, a little bit of a chunk missing, but it looks great. I wish though that they had told me how much pain I might still have, that because I did a lumpectomy, I did need to do 30 treatments of radiation,
Mhm.
and the fibrosis and the scar tissue and the nerve damage from the radiation and the different points that I had to have it around and the dosage that I needed to get. I still have a lot of pain in my breast. I still have a lot of swelling. I still have a lot of issues. And I think, I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? But I think had I known that that was a possibility, I might have opted for the double mastectomy, to be honest,
Sure.
because it's hard. Like I cannot wear real bras. It still hurts to put on any of my clothes. I still deal with limited range of motion. I mean, there are just so many side effects that I didn't know. I kind of thought, okay, I did the chemo, I got through it. I did the surgery, I got through it. I did the radiation, I got through it. Eventually it'll all go away and I'll be good, right? Because everyone just kept saying, get back to normal now, get back to normal. I thought that meant my body would go back to normal too, and it never did. And it's been quite a process of recovery, trying to figure out how to live with a new body that doesn't do always what I want it to do, and it doesn't look the way that I thought it would look at this point, 4 years later. And so I've had to deal with some of those pieces. But so I did the surgery and then I also did the 30 treatments of radiation, and I finished active treatment in April of 21.
Okay. So just about a year it took for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking before we came on that all these treatments are, I do the analogy to like a seatbelt or a airbag in your car. If you're in a car accident, it's going to most likely save your life, but it will most definitely increase the amount of injury. And
Yes.
I mean it's a bad analogy, but it's a similar thing, that
It
these
is
treatments
similar.
are going to have long-term effects. And when you have people telling you, okay, you're done, it's time to get back to normal, they don't understand that these things can continue on, and that's, I don't want to say it's okay, but it's just reality.
Yeah. I have a quote that I wanted to share that I wrote in telling people what it was like to try and, like, I mean, I've always been a survivor, But to get through active treatment, I thrived during active treatment because I was like, I'm doing something to get rid of the disease,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm actively taking steps, and the more effects I have from chemo, the more that I have confidence it's working. Like the sicker I got, I'm like, good, because this means that it's getting it and it's gonna, it's eradicating it, right? But then the day that I finished my active treatment on my last day of radiation, I just cried and cried and cried. And I came to my office and I saw 8 clients that day because I've been sidelined for almost a year. And dargone it, I am getting back to full time. I mean, my doctors yelled at me for that, and I wish I hadn't done it that way. I was just so anxious to get back to this normal that everyone kept talking about. And all caveat to that is I'm a freaking therapist, and I still thought my life would go back to normal. Like I do this for a living, and I still thought I can put this behind me. And it's like, no, you have to integrate it into your life differently. So the quote that I wanted to share that I wrote is, it's like rebuilding a different life with the same main character minus a glass of confidence with a shot of part of you removed from within.
Mm.
And that has like kind of been my mantra, but in a really, it used to mean something that would cause me tears and to cry, and now it means something really positive because I'm different, and that's okay.
That is beautiful. All right, I want you to send that to
I can
me
send that to you.
because I wanna actually have that. That's
Okay.
fantastic. And I've heard from so many people that a similar experience, like the last day when they're done with active treatment and they're sent back out into the world, people don't know what to do. And it's like, what do you mean you don't want to see me for 6 months? Like I've been seeing you, every 3 weeks. Like I don't know what to do with myself. And that's just, it's very, very common. Then you get into the scanxiety and all of these other emotional issues when you no longer have the medical staff holding your hand through all of it. So I thank
We're,
you for bringing that up.
I think too, the rest of your support system, like my parents moved back here in July when I got diagnosed. So they were gone from March. And then when I got diagnosed, my dad's like, I'll load the camper. We can be on our way tomorrow. We'll just come live in your driveway again. And I was like, like let's just pause. Let's just take a beat and see what this is going to mean, because I just, assumed that surgery would be the first line of defense, and turns out it wasn't. And my mom said later, she's like, I knew that you were going to ask us to come, but we really wanted it to be your timing, and we wanted it to be your choice, and we didn't want to force the support on you. We wanted you to feel okay to ask for it. So I remember the day before I was going to get my port put in and I was going to start chemo the following week, and I called my mom and I was like, Mom, will you come? And she goes, camper's loaded, we'll leave in the morning. And I still
Aw,
get teary eyed thinking about that
aw.
because I never for a second doubted that they wouldn't come.
Mhm.
But my mom was right. Like, it did need to be my decision, and I'm so glad that they let it be mine instead of saying, nope, we're coming, you're going to need the help. It was like they just packed their things and then waited in the wing for when I called them into the game. And so they packed up their camper a few months after being here for 6 months because of my dad's medical stuff, came back out here. But then when I finished treatment, they left and they went home again. And it was like, they have to get back to their lives, right? I mean, they moved across the country for this to help me through this so I could still work and get to my treatments and things like that. And so they left, and all of a sudden the house was big and empty. And I didn't get any more cards in the mail. And people were like, okay, so now your hair is going to grow back. You're going back to work full time. Like, you're good, right? You look great. Like, you don't look sunken, and your skin's not quite as gray, and you're bouncing back. So we're going to go now. And it just felt like going from seeing multiple doctors a week to, oh, you want to see me in 2 weeks? Then it was, oh, I'm coming back in 3 months. Like, what am I supposed to do between now and, I mean, it was just so sad. And it was like, okay, this is obviously when the emotional recovery begins, because I wasn't happy to end treatment. I was like, but now I just wait and see. And they're like, yeah, I mean, there's no endocrine therapies for triple negative. There's no maintenance drugs you take. It is just kind of a wait and see. And yet my recurrence rate was going to be 30% for the next 3 years. Like, what? I Okay, I guess this is my new life now. And everyone's like, but it's normal. It's going to be normal again.
Right.
And it just,
And
it
can
wasn't
get
good.
back to life and you're good now and we're gone. Yeah, that's a huge thing as
Yeah.
well. You kind of miss the checking in on you because that's
Yeah.
when I mean people have emotional breakdowns after that because they don't know what to do anymore and everybody just leaves and gets back to normal life. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up because that is something that I hear very frequently. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I thought I was fine and now I'm like crying every day like this isn't supposed to happen, what's wrong with me? It's like, no,
Right.
there's
I'm
nothing
supposed to
wrong
be
with you.
happy.
Right.
I'm
You should be
supposed to be
happy you don't have
resilient.
cancer anymore, right?
I got to live up to that strong and brave everyone was spent 9 months telling me I was,
Yep.
which I don't
Yeah,
like those words, by the way, but
that's okay. We
it
all have our
implies
own
that I had
words.
a choice to be strong
Yeah,
and brave, and I
right.
didn't. Like, you know,
You just do what you have to do.
exactly.
That's right. Okay. All right. So moving on. So you had been a therapist before. Had like were you a sexual therapist before, or did that kind of come as you were going through all of this with your partner and experiencing the boom 33 you're sent into menopause
Yeah.
and all the loveliness that comes with that, or
Yeah.
how did that evolution happen?
Yeah. So I've actually been a certified sex therapist since 2014. That's when I got
Okay.
my certification. So I was a sex therapist, and it was interesting. Working with clients around confidence and resilience and traumatic things and redefining sex lives and working on their relationships as my femininity and sexuality dwindled. And it was very unique for my clients to watch me get sicker and sicker. And I'm so blessed because one of my original thoughts when I got diagnosed and I had to start notifying my clients, and it's COVID, so not like everyone didn't have a ton of stress on their plate already with abandonment and sense of belonging taken away and stuff like that. But my thought was, and this is ego talking, this is complete ego, but it was like, no one's gonna want an ugly sex therapist.
Oh,
Not that I like thought of myself as particularly good looking before that, but I just thought nobody wants a sick one. Like, how am I going to tell people and like guide them through their journey of gaining confidence and redefining and empowerment of themselves sexually when they're literally like watching me get bald and wear wigs and I don't have eyelashes and I have sweat running down my face because of the hot flashes from being in chemical menopause basically overnight, and I'm feeling anything other than confident in my body and in my skin. I don't even know my body. I don't recognize it. I don't think I can trust it. And here I am talking to people about trusting themselves. And so looking back, I wish I would have gotten into my own personal therapy at that point, because I had taken a break from my own journey just because of COVID and things like that. And my oncologist wasn't thrilled that I continued to see clients in person going through chemo. So I continued to work during chemo and all my treatments. And my oncologist was like, okay, but like try to see him virtually. I was like, I got to get out of my house. I need my office. I need my clients. My clients need me. My work gives me purpose. So I made the choice to continue working. Um, and I'm glad that I did. I think there's questions about how much I continued to work. I think that was the part of my life that I could still consider normal at that point.
hmm.
But I was trying to limit my exposure to people. I was trying to reduce my risk of infection. I didn't want to get COVID, right? We were all so terrified of it. I didn't want to go to chemo having exposed the other people I was in chemo with to anything that I was exposed to. So I didn't start my own personal therapy back up until after my active treatment ended. I wish I would have made a different choice on that. But again, hindsight's 2020, right? But it was hard talking about sex and sexuality all day and then going home and looking in the mirror and judging myself, criticizing myself, trying to be kind to myself. It wasn't all negative self-talk, but there was enough of it where it was really hard. I did, when the neuropathy set into my fingers and I couldn't write anymore with my pen, I did audio journaling. So the journaling where you can speak into a diary. And I listened back to some of those. It took me 2 years to be able to, but I listened back to some of those and I'm like, man, how much did I try to go through alone without talking to other people because I didn't think they would get it. I didn't think they would relate. I mean, I talked to my breastie, who is also a therapist, so that helped because she got it. Um, but it was hard being a sex therapist and talking about sexuality when I felt like my boobs are trying to kill me. Sexually, I'm in menopause and everything's drying up. Couldn't have intercourse. My mucus linings, everything was struggling, right? Like I couldn't even use my hands to participate in sex because of the neuropathy. I had mouth sores. I didn't find myself attractive. I had bruises still everywhere from where I had the lymph node surgery and the port put in. And it was just like every time I looked at my body and tried to feel something sexual internally inside my body and my brain, it just got shut down immediately. And so that's a pretty unique part of my journey, figuring out how to deal with my own personal internal stuff and yet how to be there for my clients. And I was blessed with my clients because every single one of them was like, we don't want to be referred to somebody else. You stick with us through our shit. We're sticking with you through yours.
Aw.
And I was just like, oh, you guys, I mean, I would come into my office and I'd have cookies outside my door. Somebody left me a Golden Girls t-shirt because I'm obsessed with the Golden Girls. And, people just left me cards. And a couple of clients, were like, how are you doing today? And I'm like, I'm good. My spirits are high. And they're like, that's not what your GoFundMe post said. And I'm like, crap, like I can't get away with this. I can't get away with not being transparent. And my clients are holding me accountable. And I'm like, they're like, we know you got a blood transfusion yesterday. I'm like, but I'm doing what I need to do to be present. The one promise I made to my clients was I will never do a session with you if I'm not confident I can be present with you and show up for your story and the things that you're wanting to work on. And so that was the bond that we had. But my clients were so compassionate and graceful towards me during that. There was one session, Melissa, where I was like wearing my wig. I had sweat running down my face. My face was flushed because I was having hot flash after hot flash. And my client's like, are you okay? And I'm like, you know what? No. Are you cool if I take my wig off? I need to get some air flowing in this. And she was like, go for it. So I whipped off my wig and I was like, I feel so much better. And she goes, I'm here for it. And I was like,
Oh.
look at this intimacy that humans can have between each other. I mean, it was such a beautiful moment. I'll never forget it.
Well, and that's a lot of what you, I don't want to say have taught them, but worked with them to be, to have that intimacy. And it's not just with a partner, it could be with, with your therapist and stuff too. So you brought up, and this is a really big piece that hopefully you can help other people with, is so many of us go through that. Like when we look in the mirror and we're like, we don't recognize our bodies and we've got all these things going on, and, our partners are trying to be understanding and like, I love you no matter what. But I mean, they're also seeing a completely different body and you don't
Right.
feel comfortable and it's just weird all around and stuff. So how did you, I don't want to say get over that, but how did you deal with that, and maybe give like a tip or two to anybody else who is experiencing that right now to maybe help them be able to feel better about themselves going through all of that?
I think it's something where we have to take the traditional view of sex and sexuality, and we take what we think we know about sex and we think we know about sexuality in general and toss it out the window. There's no guidebook or handbook for this stuff. And I think that reminding ourselves that there are so many forms of intimacy other than the behaviors of sex and what we think we have to do to have sex, if we are able to expand that definition and really tap into the place we go within ourselves with sex and sexuality, it feels a little bit lighter. There are times when I would hear my mom say to a loved one who didn't think I could hear, it's like, we got to be strong for her. We got to be strong. And I'd come around the corner and be like, circle in the garage. We're checking in about this crap because I need to know how everyone's feeling. I'm not doing great. I'm pretty sure y'all aren't doing great. Let's talk about this. And, my parents they grew up in the generation where it's like, you buck up and you get through it. Like you have to put one foot in front of the other. I know you don't want to eat your quarter cup of oatmeal, but freaking eat it because you have to get something in you. My mom would just watch me and be like, okay, It's been another half hour. Eat another bite of oatmeal. And I'm like, I don't want to. And she's like, do it anyway, you know? And I'm glad she was like that. But I think realizing that that's intimacy, and realizing that saying the things that you don't think you should say is intimacy. And as long as you're being vulnerable in a way that means it's strength and not weakness, I think that if we can't talk about it, we shouldn't be doing it. So if we can't talk about sex and how we're feeling about ourselves, we shouldn't be having sex, and it's going to be really hard to feel things about ourselves. I think having conversations that are tough and uncomfortable, but knowing and being reminded, that's intimacy. Intimacy isn't just batting your eyes at each other and the butterflies that you get when you go on a date or watch a movie, or the handholds. It's also the, I'm really upset today. Today's not a good day, but I still want to crawl in your lap and tell you about it. It's the, hey, I'm not feeling up for sexy time tonight, but can we listen to a podcast or a devotion together? Hey, my fingers are really hurting and I've got mouth sores, and I don't feel comfortable kissing you or massaging you tonight, but will you sit with me while I'm in my bath trying to flush this crap out of me, and let's just talk? That can still be time with sexuality. And that can still be considered sexy moments, even if you're not physically doing something to move towards orgasm. I mean, I don't think the goals of the goals of sex should ever be orgasm and intercourse anyway, because I think that that's too performance based. And sex is so much more than the behaviors that we do. It's an integrative experience. And there were times throughout my cancer and chemo and radiation when I forgot to integrate the experience, and I forgot to include my brain and my spirit in the journey too. And I think that's another tip that I would give, is remember that there's multiple forms of intimacy, not just behaviors. Sex is so much more than behaviors. Sexuality is a place you go within you that you might share with somebody else. And then talk and communicate, and remember that it's about your mind and your spirit too.
And definitely seek out therapy.
Yeah, I mean that too. Everyone should be in therapy, but I'm
Everybody should be in therapy. Yes. So did your own journey with cancer, did that lead you to add the chronic disease cancer portion to your practice? Were you doing that before? How did that evolution happen?
Yeah, great question. I was working with quite a few clients who were dealing with some sort of chronic illness, whether it be cancer, autoimmune diseases, chronic pain, things like that, chronic fatigue, different diagnoses. I will say that going through cancer myself changed the way that I showed up with clients who are dealing with those issues. I now consider working with those populations a specialty rather than just an interest of mine, because I have so much more training, so much more knowledge. I've done so much more research that I found myself dealing with, or let me say that differently, making space for people's personal experiences with cancer and illness, doing that differently. Before it was, okay, well, what have you been through? Now it was, how have you experienced what you've been through? Like asking people, making space for people to talk about not only the treatments that, they're undergoing, or what the physical act or the physical diagnosis of cancer or illness is like, but also what kind of influence or impact has it had on you? What's your support system like? I really went back to my systems training, where I was like, this isn't just about the person in front of me. It's about everything that is that person that's sitting in front of me. I think we don't have a soul, we are a soul. And I made a lot more space to get to know my clients' souls and where they've been in life and what led up to their illness and diagnosis. And then, what do you want this to mean for your life? And it was more than just, well, make sure you're getting adequate nutrition, and make sure that you're talking to your doctors about your symptoms, and make sure that you're working with dilators or, sexual wellness products that can help you get sensation back. It was more of, let's incorporate your partner or a loved one or your friends, or let's get you into a support group, or let's get you a pelvic floor therapist who can work with that part of your body. It's adding in all of the pieces rather than just talking about what's happened? Like, what's your illness been like? It's what's your illness done to you? What is your life like? What are how emotionally how are you doing? You know, things like that. It's just expanded the work that I do around those topics.
And it's just the way you talk about it, it's just a subtle shift, but it makes all the difference. Just changing that one little piece allows people to be so much more open about their experiences versus, oh yeah, I went to chemo today
Right.
and move on to other things. So
And I know I'm going to
that's
get sick in a couple days when the steroids wear off, and it's like, okay, but where are you mentally? You know, like what are the things weighing heavily on you? What's your support systems like, and who can you rely on to talk to about these things once you leave session here today? I had a client who was crying, laying on the floor, and I laid on the floor with her. I cried, and I had a client who was really in a hard spot over on the couch. I went and sat on the couch next to her instead of sitting in my chair across the room. And before I wouldn't have done that, I would have been like, nope, this is the ethical professional boundary, and I am here for you. Now I'm in it with you. Like, if you're knee deep in crap, so am I. And how can I help? And what do you need from me today? Instead of, here's the training and information I can offer you. And, it felt like a piece of me was missing in my work. And I think grad school, they're very strict on like how to do ethical therapy. And I mean, I still do ethical therapy, but I think I access a lot more of my own emotion in order to be present with someone else's emotion. And my clients have given me feedback that it makes it more real, makes it more relatable, and that it means the world to them to know I'm not scared to hold their pain, and I'm not scared to let them talk about it either. Because a lot of cancer patients, maybe other people have talked about this on your show, but they don't want to be a burden to people. They don't want to show weakness. They want to try and stay positive. There are times when I'd be like, ugh, maybe, I'm thinking about death a lot, and I don't know what that's about, but I think I would, and some people would say, no, you can't think about that. Don't think about death. You're going to manifest death if you think about death. And I was like, okay, I understand how you can have that experience, and that's not my experience. And so it was, learning to find my people that could sit with the pain. And so I wanted to make sure that when I'm with clients, I'm sitting with their pain and I'm not trying to talk them into one form or another of it.
And that's truly I think some of it's intuitive, but some of it is really a learned skill. Like I'm the type of person that I always want to make people feel better. I always want to bring a smile to their face. I always want to fix things. And it's something I'm really learning through my own work and working with cancer patients, that sometimes you can't make it better. Sometimes you just need to sit in the muck with them and let them just feel whatever they're going to feel, because
Exactly.
sometimes you just can't make it better. And trying to make it better is just going to make them feel worse. So I love that. I love that part of your practice, because not all therapists out there are going to do something like that, and those
Feelings.
ethical boundaries are in place for a reason.
Correct.
But I think it's more your relationship with your clients to be able to do that and not have it cross boundaries.
Feelings are meant to be felt, not fixed. And I
Oh,
just really try to sit with that and make sure that my work with clients mirrors that.
I love this. That's beautiful. Feelings are meant to be felt, not fixed. That
Yep.
is fantastic. And we are short on time, which and we talked about this beforehand because this was a possibility. I really want to do justice and do a deep dive into sexual health, sexual wellness. We just kind of scratched the surface,
Yeah.
but this conversation has been fantastic in so many other realms. So I love this, but I definitely want to have you back on and really do a deep dive on all things sexual health, because again, like I said in the beginning of the show, it is so vital to our lives. Like that's what we're designed for. So
Yes.
before we go, because we're going to do this again, how can people get a hold of you? where can they find you? If they want to have a conversation, do you do virtual counseling? Like tell us how people can get a hold of you.
Yes. So I run a group practice. So we have 7 clinicians, and several of them specialize and have a special interest and a special place in their heart and their work for people dealing with chronic illness, cancer specifically. Again, all genders, all lifestyles, everything like that. We just think that sexuality is such an integral and essential part of being human that we're passionate about helping people talk through how to be healthier in those aspects. So, making changes that they want to make. So, the way that people can get a hold of me, our website is dalliantsexualwellness.com.
Okay.
So, www.dalliantsexualwellness.com. We're on Facebook, Dalliant Sexual Wellness Collective. We're on Instagram, Dalliance_SWC. We're on X, formerly Twitter. We do have a Pinterest page. We're on all the socials. And
Cool.
so another thing is that if people go to our website, they can sign up for our monthly newsletter, which is called Pleasure Perspectives. And every month we release a different topic in the field of sexuality and sexual wellness. But we're giving meditations to do. We're giving out worksheets. We have a little blurb about what we're reading, watching, and listening to currently, so that you don't just have to get resources from us. There are so many resources out there that people don't know about that, we like to direct people in other directions as well as a complement to therapy. And then my email is heather@dalliantsexualwellness.com. And so if anyone has questions, or they want to do a 20-minute consult, or they want to seek our services for actual sexual wellness therapy, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay. Awesome. Well, all this stuff will be in the show notes. Absolutely. And stay tuned, because we are going to do part 2, and we are going to talk even more about all of this fun stuff. So Thank you so much for being on the show today, Heather. I really appreciate your time. And I can't wait to have you back on for the next episode.
You're welcome. And thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.